So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael. I am not the student minister. That is Stephen, who is somewhere. I think he's in the back somewhere. But hey, I'm so glad to be here. I always love to see you guys. Youth group is just awesome. I remember when I was y'all's age and I was in youth group. It was super, super cool. Every time I've come up here, I've realized in some way, shape, or form, I have talked about my time overseas when I actually lived in Japan. And I realized while I was doing all those, I've actually never showed you any pictures of my time there. You guys want to see some pictures? Yeah? All right. Let me show you the first one. So this is actually in Kanagawa, Japan. I stuck out like a sore thumb, let me tell you. This is actually at a Buddhist temple. And it's weird too. I'm actually there and I'm actually wearing a shirt that says Jesus Freak on it. Really weird. Yeah, Jesus Freak. Yeah, man. And so I got this picture, and then the next picture is that's actually a Shinto shrine in Japan. Now, I stuck out like a sore thumb for a couple of reasons. One, I'm super, super tall. Another thing is I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Shinto. I follow Jesus. And so I don't fit in already. You know, it's already awkward. Most of Japan is not Christian. Actually, it's only about 1% are Christian. Okay, but it's just super different. And so here's another example of how I stick out. You know, actually, how about this? Do you see this picture? What's odd about this picture? They're on the left. They drive on the opposite side of the road. And let me tell you, getting into a car for the first time and driving to another city was absolutely strange. So they drive on the other side of the road. And that's always interesting. Here's another one. This is actually in Shibuya. So I love the guy behind me. I took this selfie and he's just kind of there like, bruh. Like, really? You took this picture? What are you doing? This is it. This is in downtown Shibuya, so you can see some of the language differences as well. It's super pretty, okay? But that's not it. You know, let me also tell you about the food. You know, the food. Oh, this is still downtown Shibuya. Here's the food. Look at the food. Oh, these are meals I ate while I lived there. And it was so good. It was so good. That's pork katsu. This is Red Bull ramen. That's shrimp tempura. That's actually Indian food that I had in Japan, which was some of the best food I've ever had. It was absolutely amazing, but it is so different from the food that I eat here. It was so different. You know, that's not all that's different. I actually couldn't really talk to anybody. Nobody there knew English, and I didn't know Japanese. How many of you know Japanese? A little bit? Okay. You guys know more than me, and I lived there. I don't know the language at all. But look at this. This is what the language looks like. And yeah, it goes downways. This is actually a memorial for World War II. It's funny, when James and I were actually loading this up onto the computer for tonight, James is the guy in the back, he thought it was a waterfall. But that's the language. I can't read that. So I was there for about 2 months, and for the first couple of months, or for the first month or so, I felt lost. Like, I was in this culture that I just don't understand. I can't talk to people. People are bowing. People are not talking. You go to a restaurant, people don't talk while they eat. I mean, it's so different from here. I had to stay clean shaven, which was weird to me because I used to have this massive beard at the time. I mean, it was just so different. And so today, we're actually going to see a couple of guys that lived in a culture that was very different than their own and how they dealt with it, okay? So we're going to be in Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1. Daniel, book of Daniel, yes. And so we're going to go way back in time. We're going to go back before America was founded. We're going to go back before the Renaissance era. We're going to go farther back than Jesus, too. We're going to go all the way back to a nation called the nation of Judea. Okay, and that nation was ruled by a guy named King Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim, yeah. Now, there were a couple of other nations in the area, and there was a nation, actually, that was called Babylon. And the king of Babylon, his name is Nebuchadnezzar, decided that he was going to completely take over all of the nearby areas. So he took out another nation called Assyria. He took out Egypt. He took out Upper Israel. And now he takes out the kingdom of Judea. And he comes and he sacks the country. And he takes all of the material and all of the wealth and everything that they value. And he takes them back to their city called Babylon. But there's another thing that they take too. This is what it says in verse 3 of Daniel chapter 1. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility. So I actually needed about 5 volunteers. Who wants to come up on stage? Cool. You can come up. Acacia, you can come up. Sure. Yeah, come on. Okay. Let's see. How do I have 3? Gabriel, why not? And who? Steven? Here, come on. Yeah, come on. All right, guys. Come on up. Come on up on stage. Come on right here.
Heck yeah.
All right. Cool. All right, wave to everybody. Say hi. Hi, everybody. Okay. So he takes some of the royal family and of the nobility, but they have a certain qualification. This is what it says, verse 4. Youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans were the upper, it was like the upper class of Babylon, okay? So they are going to learn like the upper language, okay? But let's see. So we're talking youth. Well, you guys are all youth compared to me. I'm almost 30.
You're 30?
No, I'm 28. All right. So here's the thing. All right. They also
22.
No, I'm not that young. All right. So here's the thing. So they also had certain qualifications, right? So how many of y'all have all A's?
4.0 GPA student.
Okay. You have all A's? You have all A's? Do you have all A's? No? Okay, you can go sit down. Sorry. Do you have all A's? Bye. Okay. I don't mean to be mean. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to point something out, okay? All right. Let's see. How old are you?
14.
How old are you?
13.
How old are you? Okay. You go sit down. You go sit down.
What?
All right. Sweet. So, Acacia. All right. So you were one of the people selected. And here's what's going to happen. You've been selected. You have been completely removed from your home. And you have now been planted in another culture. Listen, you've been planted into another culture. You're going to have to learn to wear different clothing. And you're going to have to learn to speak a whole new language. And that will be the language you speak for the rest of your life. Okay? So hold on. Give me a second. All right. So the culture that you've been planted into, these are the hats. Everyone wears these. It's a requirement. Okay? Backwards. There you go. Yep. All right. That's a Panama hat, by the way. All right. And then you also have to wear this. Here. All right. All right. Actually, you know what you look like?
Hey, what?
You look like... Did you rip my jacket? You look like a 1920s Jedi. All right, so for the rest of your life, everywhere you go, you have to wear this all the time. Now you have to learn a whole nother language. What languages do you know, Acacia?
English.
You know English. Okay. So for the rest of your life, you're going to have to speak Mandarin. For the rest of your life. You don't know it, but that's okay. You get 3 years to learn it. But do you guys see what happened? She has been completely removed from what she knows here, and now she has to live completely foreign to how she lives now, right? Is that odd? Okay, thank you, Acacia. You can go sit down. You can put everything over there. All right. So here's the thing. Pay attention, Gabriel. Pay attention. So here's the thing. Not only are they wearing different clothing, not only are they speaking a different language, but also they're eating different food. This is what it says in verse 5. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. So these people that we're talking about have been removed from their culture, completely assimilated into a new culture. They're going to have 3 years of education. They're receiving food from the king's table, which was a sign of authority from the king. The king's basically saying, you owe me absolute loyalty. And then when that time is over, you're going to stand before me. And when you stood before a king, guys, and you messed up, it was your life. I mean, this is serious. This is bad. It's crazy. But who were these people? Who are the ones that were picked? Well, this is what it says in verse 6. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. Okay, those are their names. Those are their names, but they have been renamed. The chief of the eunuchs gave them new names. Daniel he calls Belteshazzar, Hananiah he calls Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. Those are really odd names, huh? Those are really interesting, really strange. Well, in that day, when someone was given a name, like when you're given a name at birth, they mean something. For example, Michael means who is like God. It's a challenge. Names had meaning to those people. Each of those names, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, those names in and of themselves actually had some relation to the true God, to Yahweh. They actually had that connection. However, this new name that they've been given actually completely rips that away from them. Their new names, guys, have no connection to God. In fact, these new names tie them to pagan gods that the Babylonians worship, or the Babylonians worship. They're not tied to Yahweh. They've been completely removed. Completely different. It's interesting. It's scary. Culture shock is a scary thing. An absolutely scary thing. So these guys are being taught, they're being trained for about 3 years. They're being fed from the king's table, which not only was the sign of authority, it was also the best food they could ever eat. It was some of the best food. I mean, it's served to the king. You think the king's going to eat bad food? It's good food. This is some of the best food. You see, Daniel and his friends, much like what we did to Acacia, Daniel and his friends had been taken from home and they've been forced to live a different life. It is absolutely different. Everything that they grew up doing, all of the fun little things, all the holidays, everything they did has completely changed. It is so different. So completely different. So the question is, are these guys, as they've been put into this culture that is so different from everything they grew up with, that honors and worships not God, but pagan gods, the question is, are they going to fully bend to that culture? Are they going to assimilate? Which should be the term. Are they going to become that culture? Well, we'll see. This is what it says in verse 8. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Okay, it's interesting. You see, the word resolved here, it's not just casual decision making. You know, this resolved, he is actively making a choice here. It is one that he stands by. He makes it deep within himself. He's not going to pick something different. This isn't casual. This isn't, well, I want Panda Express today. Okay, I like Panda Express, but it's not just that. This is active. He has decided this. Now, it's interesting that Daniel and his friends would not eat from the king's table. Of all of the things to argue about, to not want to do, they don't want to eat from the king's table, and they don't want to drink his wine. Well, there's 3 reasons for that. The first one is because the food that the king ate was not going to be food that the Jewish people would eat. This is going to be stuff like pig. And don't get me wrong, I love bacon, but the people back in that day did not eat, the Jewish people did not eat bacon. They didn't eat pig. It was probably a bunch of other things. Another reason is that the food that was at the king's table was probably sacrificed to pagan gods. They were probably strangled at the altars and then brought to the king, which is gruesome, but that was a cultural practice. So Daniel doesn't want to participate. He doesn't want to eat that. That's gross. The third reason, and the huge reason, remember, the king's table signified authority, right? When you ate from the king's table, you are pledging your absolute loyalty to the king. There's no one higher than the king for you. So you are going to do whatever he says. And that's where Daniel draws the line. He says, I cannot eat from your table. Because Daniel and his friends, we'll see in a minute, Daniel and his friends choose not to compromise. Here, this is where they draw the line. The line is drawn here with the food. They won't do it. Absolutely not. Their primary allegiance is to God. So, Daniel, he's stuck. He has to eat this food, but he's decided he's not going to. And starving is just not an option. It's not a good option. It's not a long-term plan. He's got 3 years to do this. He's not going to. So instead, he goes to the chief eunuch, which is going to be the guy that oversees them. This is the guy that is going to watch them. This is the guy that's going to make sure that they are healthy, that they're taken care of, that their needs are met. And he goes to the chief eunuch and he asks him this question. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear the Lord my king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. So let's break that down. So Daniel goes to the guy overseeing him, the chief of the eunuchs, and he basically says, hey, I don't want to eat this food. I don't want to defile myself. I don't want to dishonor my God. And the chief says, I'm scared for my life. The king's told me that you have to eat this food. And if you don't, you're going to be in worse condition. You're going to get sick. You're going to become skinny. You're not going to look healthy. Another thing that's really important in this culture, if you're going to become a wise man, which is what they're prepping Daniel and his buddies for, is you're going to get fat. You're going to get really fat. Weird, right? Yeah, you're going to get fat. And here's the thing. If you were fat, it was because you were smart, and therefore you were wealthy, and therefore you had a lot of food. So therefore, because you were fat, you had a lot of food, which meant you had a lot of money, which meant you were smart. Therefore, you were wise. Everybody follow? So the goal is to get these guys fat. And if they are not eating the king's food, they're not going to get fat. They're actually going to get very sick. Very, very sick. To the point where the chief eunuch's like, hey, if you don't do this, it's going to be my head on the line. I'm going to die for this. So instead, Daniel suggests something different. He suggests a test. This is what it says, verse 11. Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servant for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So the chief listened to him and tested them for 10 days. Veggies and water, guys. Veggies and water. How many of you guys like veggies? Cool. Who wants veggies? All right, cool. Hunter, you can have veggies. There you go, man. All right, cool. They're frozen, so I wouldn't recommend eating them right now. Veggies and water. That's all they're eating. And it's not just veggies. The word here could also mean grains. So they could be eating veggies, bread, and water. Okay, but that's all they're eating. They're not eating meat. They're not drinking juice or wine or anything else. It's just veggies and water. That's all it is. That's quite a daunting task. I've been on many diets in my life, guys, and let me tell you, I do not do well on diets, especially if there's no protein. If I don't have meat, I want to have my hamburger. I love burgers, man. I love burgers and fries. Putting me on veggies is just not going to work, okay? It's hard. It's very hard. You see, Daniel and his friends, they decide to rely on God for this. That's what they're doing. They're relying on God to get through this because it's not easy. It is absolutely not easy. So, if you're the chief eunuch and you're watching everything that's happening, and you were going to put these guys on veggies and water for 10 days, they're not going to get fat. They're actually going to do the opposite. They're going to get skinny and they're going to get sick. And that's not what this guy wants at all. So this guy is probably expecting that when the 10 days are up, oh, look, I'm sorry, you're not looking great. I'm going to have to put you back on the king's table. Problem solved, right? Well, 10 days later, this is what happens. Verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and they were fatter in flesh. Remember, they were fatter. They were fatter than all of the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. That's odd. So not everyone, just Daniel and his buddies chose to do this vegetable and water thing. But not everyone did it. There were a couple of others that chose to eat from the king's table. It's interesting, it's really weird, how 10 days later, after eating veggies and water, they're fatter than all the other guys. All the other guys that were eating the meat from the king's table, drinking all of his stuff, like, they should be skinnier, they should be sick, and they're not. It's weird. It's awesome. It's actually supernatural. It comes from God. God is taking care of these guys to the point where because they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than everyone else, the steward goes, all right, you know what? You can stay on your veggie and water diet for the next 3 years. And that's what they do. He takes away that food and gives them veggies and water. You know, this is a trend, actually. This is something called the Daniel diet. I have family that have tried this. In fact, I saw my aunt and uncle over December, and they were telling me that, oh, we're doing the Daniel diet. Well, we're going to eat nothing but veggies and water for 3 years and 10 days. Really interesting. And I told my aunt and uncle, I was like, okay, cool. Well, how's it working? How's it going? And they were like, hey, it's going great. We've lost about 15 pounds. And I can be a very blunt person sometimes. And I just looked at my aunt and uncle. I just said, it's not working, is it? Because you should be getting fatter, not skinnier. I got in a lot of trouble for that. But hey, it was worth it because the whole point is not to take the diet because it's healthy. The whole point was taking the diets because it was relying on God. And that's what Daniel and his buddies were doing, not to get healthy. This is supernatural. This is a work of God. It's so different. But that's not it. Not only after 10 days were these guys healthy, not only were they fatter in flesh after 10 days, but also after 3 years. Look at verse 17. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. These guys not only were better in appearance and fatter in flesh, they were smart. They were wicked smart. They were very smart. It was awesome. And so at the end of the time, that is the end of those 3 years, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before the king, Nebuchadnezzar. The king spoke with them, and among all of them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better, literally meaning 10 hands better. One of these guys was worth 10 hands worth of another guy. That's how valuable these guys were. And they were in all of his kingdom. I mean, these guys were top tier. And that was a gift from God. Daniel and his buddies, yes, they go on this diet. Yes, they rely on God, and God takes care of them because of that. For 3 years and 10 days, they eat nothing but veggies and water. You see, Daniel and his buddies when they go to the king is so impressed with them. They all of a sudden become some of his wisest wise men. And if you keep reading the book of Daniel, there are some amazing things that happen because Daniel and his buddies are there. You know, if you were in the council chamber of these guys and you're there and you're listening to Daniel and his buddies, you'd be like, hey, assimilation complete. These guys are now Babylonian. They're no longer Jewish. They're no longer from the country of Judea. It would be like when Acacia was up here. Hey, she's no longer New Mexican. Hey, she's now whatever culture it was that we were putting her into. In 1920s, Jedi, Star Wars, whatever, it would be like that. She would be very, very different. And that's what these guys thought, that they had fully made them Babylonian, but not fully, because these guys didn't fully compromise, didn't compromise at all. And while they talked Babylonian, while they wore clothing like Babylonians, while they lived in the Babylonian culture miles away from home, they still trusted, honored, and relied on their God, on our God. You see, Daniel and his friends, their culture tried to pull them from God, and they chose to never compromise because they relied on him through this test and with their lives. And so if there's anything, listen, if there is anything you're going to get out of this message today, it's this. Our culture will try to pull you from God. Rely on him and never compromise. Our culture will try to pull you from God, and we need to rely on God, and we need to never compromise. So today, we live in a very different culture than these guys did. It's very different. You know, if you're not a believer, if you've never heard about Jesus, let me tell you, there's a guy that has never, ever compromised in any way. And in fact, he lived a life that was so perfect that he died a death he didn't deserve. If you've never trusted in him, you ought to. It's worth it. But for the rest of us who are believers, we live in this culture. We live in the United States. We live in 2025. Our culture is so different from theirs. But unlike Daniel and his buddies, we weren't pulled from our culture. We live in this culture. We were born in this culture. We were raised in this culture. And this culture, guys, is not for God. It lives as opposite as it can to God. And so what I would tell you and what I am learning more and more day by day is that as this culture continues to try to pull us from God, we need to rely on him. And so, when you're going through life, when you're in school or watching the movies, you're going to see things, you're going to encounter things that are not exactly God-honoring. That's the culture we live in. You're going to be probably playing with video games with friends at night, and you're going to be joking, you're going to be laughing, you're going to be making fun of some guy, and maybe the joke's going to go too far. And that's unfortunate. We'll be watching a movie and we'll want to do some of the things that happen in the movies, but those things don't necessarily honor the Lord. They're just movies. Maybe you're on social media and you're scrolling and you're dealing with people that are difficult, or maybe you're seeing things that you're like, oh, that's super cool. That's awesome. I want to do that. But it's something that the Lord would never approve of. Or maybe you're in the middle of the night and you're just kind of, scrolling and just kind of doom scrolling on YouTube or TikTok or doing something along those lines. And maybe there are things popping up that you shouldn't be seeing. Whatever it is, there are things in our lives that we know that don't honor the Lord. And we need to find what they are. And we need to remember to rely on him and not cave. And to never compromise. Jesus made it very clear. He always told us that there were two, he summarized all the commandments into two things. We needed to love God and we need to love others. In your life, as you are dealing with people and as you are meeting new people and as things are difficult, are you loving God and are you loving others? Because at the end of the day, if you're doing those, you are honoring the Lord. The goal of all of this is not to try to go on a diet or a new fad The goal of this is not any of that. Our culture is very different. We need to be prepared for that. We need to be prepared because at the end of the day, our culture will try to pull you from God. And you and I, we need to rely on Him, and we must never compromise. And so as we're going to go to groups in a minute, and I don't know what you got to do. If you need to talk to a group leader, they'll be there. If whatever's going on, feel free to talk to us. So I'm going to go to the Lord in prayer, and then Stephen will come up. So Lord, we come before you. Thank you for our time together. Thank you for letting us go into your word and for us to just learn about the life of Daniel and everything that they went through and how they were pulled out of their culture and how they were assimilated into a new, and yet they never gave up on their relationship with you. And so, Lord, let us do the same. Let us honor and glorify you in all we do. In your name we pray. Amen.